A small-town foster child and school dropout, Anene Booysen was never destined to make international headlines. But the gruesome details of her brutal rape and murder in February shocked the country and the world. EWN went back to Bredasdorp to try and understand how the life of a teenager who by all accounts was quiet and withdrawn ended in such violence. What we found was a community riddled with social ills, of which Anene's case is the tip of the iceberg.
An attack that never should have happened. That's how family and friends describe the brutal murder of 17-year-old Anene Booysen. And now they've come to say their final goodbyes. Booysen was on her way home last Saturday when she was mutilated and left for dead at this construction site.
They found her in a deserted construction site, bleeding, barely alive, and yet she named her attackers. What happened to this young woman would shake a nation to its core. This is the story of Anene Booysen, a 17-year-old South African girl whose brutal murder exposed the darkest corners of violence, injustice, and silence. Stay with me. On the evening of February 2nd, 2013, Anene Booysen left a pub in the small town of Bredasdorp in the Western Cape. She was young, vibrant, and full of hope, a cleaner at a construction company with dreams ahead. Around dawn the next day, a security guard found her lying at the base of a construction site, severely injured. She had been gagged, mutilated, her body disemboweled. She clung to life for a few hours, but the injuries were too deep. Her attackers were already names on her lips. A town watched in horror. A country held its breath. The news spread fast. Anene's condition, the severity of her wounds, described by doctors as the worst they had seen. The public outcry was immediate. Nationwide protests. A cry for justice. The president condemned the act. At her funeral in the Dutch Reformed Church in Bredasdorp, hundreds gathered. She became not just a victim, but a symbol of the pain and failure of the system. But beneath the marches and headlines lay unanswered questions. Why were so many perpetrators still free? Why did law enforcement fail before this horror? The community, once quiet and close-knit, was shattered. From the crime scene to the hospital, the investigation raced. In her final hours, Anene managed to name one attacker. But evidence, witnesses, and the scene itself painted a far more complex picture.
But to understand the events of Saturday morning, the 2nd of February, one must recognize the context. By talking to Anene's peers, EWN started building a picture of what life is like for young people growing up in Bredasdorp. The portrait photograph of Anene, which accompanied various news reports on her death, is poignant because it is one of only about 4 taken of the 17-year-old. Anene was placed in foster care at a young age due to poor conditions at home, including domestic violence and alcohol abuse. Sabina Booysen, Anene's biological mother, was incarcerated for culpable homicide over the death of one of her children in February 2008. Although 15 when she dropped out of school, Anene was only midway through grade 7 at De Heide Primary. By some accounts, she made an income from domestic work and doing chores for her foster mother. Many evenings were spent at a local pub with friends.
5 or 6 men were implicated, yet initial arrests were minimal. The police, the prosecutors, the political pressure, all under enormous strain. Meanwhile, victims and survivors of sexual violence watched and asked, would this case change anything? Law enforcement promised justice. But justice is slow when systems are fractured. Months later, the trial commenced. One man, Johannes Kana, admitted to raping Anene. He was convicted and sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms. But for many, the sentence was only part of the story. The other suspects, free or never fully prosecuted. The courtroom held the weight of a nation's anguish. Families, activists, survivors all waited for justice to mean more than words. For some, it felt like too little, too late. Anene's murder triggered not just grief, but national reflection. Statistics, gender-based violence, rural isolation, police under-resourcing, all came under scrutiny. Mass protests, calls for reforms, symbolic gestures. But change is slow. The question remained, would this case be a moment that shifted the tide or just a tragic headline? Survivors spoke out. Communities demanded reform. Legislators promised. And while those promises echo, actions often lag. What happened to all the alleged attackers? Why was only one fully convicted? How could a daughter be so badly harmed in a small town hours from home? These questions linger. Beyond the particulars of one crime, this case forces us to ask, how safe are we really? If a quiet town can harbor this horror, what about the towns we don't hear about? And for viewers, this isn't just South Africa's problem. It's a story about systemic failure, about human vulnerability, about as many truths as there are questions.
Booysen was attacked allegedly on her way home from the pub in early February. She died in Cape Town hours later, but not before mentioning one of her alleged attackers, Jonathan Davids. Davids was acquitted earlier this year after investigators failed to secure enough evidence against him. An attack that never should have happened. That's how family and friends describe the brutal murder of 17-year-old Anene Booysen. And now they've come to say their final goodbyes. Booysen was on her way home last Saturday when she was raped, mutilated and left for dead at this construction site. She lived long enough to identify one of her attackers, a man known to the family. The crime has left not only Bredasdorp, but the world in shock.
It's one of the last times Johannes Kanne will be able to sit this close to his family. Throughout the course of the trial, he's shown little remorse. But while pleading for leniency, Kanne's lawyer said his client cooperated fully with police and was under the influence of alcohol when the crimes were committed, mitigating factors that did not satisfy the court.
Anene was brutally raped in the most barbaric fashion. This cruel act was the direct cause of her death, which was described by doctors as the mutilation of her genitals.
The National Prosecuting Authority has declared the sentence as a victory in the war against violence on women and children.
Johannes Kanne has been handed a double life sentence by Judge Patricia Goliath in the Swellendam Circuit Court for the rape and murder of Anene Booysen. Judge Goliath addressed Kanne before sentencing him to 50 years in prison, saying that he shows no remorse for the cruel, inhumane actions that led to Booysen's death. Goliath cited the shock the community was in after Booysen's murder and said it would be in the best interests of the community and Kanne that he be locked away for a long time.